An old house, a shadowy porch, tiles, a crumbling Arab decoration, a man sitting against the wall, a deserted street, a Mediterranean tree. This old photograph touches me. It is quite simply there that I would like to live. This desire affects me at a depth and according to roots which I do not know. Warmth of climate, Mediterranean myth, Apollonism, defection, withdrawal, anonymity, nobility. Whatever the case, with regard to myself, my motives, my fantasy, I want to live there, en finesse. And the tourist photograph never satisfies that esprit de finesse. For me, photographs of landscape, urban or country, must be habitable, not visitable. Behold, this is Vильнюс. There are many photographers of Vильnюs. Every photographer has photographed Vильnюs. Not all of them have accented this theme. You had a camera with you as you walked, and there was no way you couldn't take photos. About 3 times a year, a bit less during winter, I make the rounds of those many places without even realizing how I get to them. Because you feel that place drawing you to it, and then you see how it's changed. What's more, you need to approach it as an ant would, or as if one were a cat, which always manages to find its way back without knowing how. So here, I'm like that cat that knows where it's going, but I don't have a sense of how to get there using the same route. And I'm obliged to find it. And then I feel good somehow. That whole generation of ours, those photographers, it seems to me that we lived, live, and will die in black and white. Now I work in color, but how to sense that color culture, what do I know about it? And that Vильnюs, and that old town, it's striking in black and white. I've noticed another thing. I keep looking at those negatives of throwaway shots. And you know, 1 or 2 years pass and I look at them again, and I notice other things. Some things have become more important than those I noticed before. Perhaps I have that rare opportunity, like Faust, to photograph my youth. I look at the images I shot when I was young with a completely different maturity and viewpoint, and I cull them, and then they see the light of day for the first time. I photograph my youth, and this compensates for the fact that I don't photograph now. I remember one cold day long ago I went into the newly built Gintaras hotel. And see how Vilnius looked. Do you see this entire field here? Today that's Fabioniškės, Pašilaičiai and Justiniškės. There's nothing there. And this is the fascination. It's something I noticed a long time ago, in those first photographers like Zaharčikas and Korzonas from long ago. All that's left are these faded images in the archives. But it's wonderful the way Vilnius appears beautifully as it did, sitting in that nest. It was, with its towers, a fantastic regal city. Look at the way those sections of Ukmergės Street stood back then. There's still quite a bit of that other side in Užupis and in other parts of Vilnius, but it's vanishing little by little. I think this photo was taken with an utterly battered old Russian camera. I don't know if you can see, but look at this scene. This is now Ozo Street in Šeškinė, roughly where the unfinished stadium is, and where they built some sort of shopping center. What's it called again? Acropolis. This is old Ukmergės Street in the early morning, just as it appeared in Brown's map. Sloping roofs. There's the riverbank. You can even see the trade union palace. There's the city planning office, and then there's that post-war construction that German POWs built. Gediminas Hill. In fact, I'm going to ask some computer experts to make the contours a little more defined. This is, you understand, a unique thing. In the archives, you can find hundreds of these by the old masters. Photographs by a German Air Force pilot, circa 1915. Cathedral Square. Town Hall Square. St. Peter and St. Paul's Church in Antakalnis. the Green Bridge. Žvėrynas Bridge. Original size 6 by 8 centimeters. We didn't walk. You could say we flew. We climbed up the roofs, and you can imagine that it was from these unusual vantage points that we shot the most interesting images of those towers. You see, I'm actually a farm boy, and I came to the city right off the farm. The city for me was a completely alien thing. While Rimtautas was born in Vильnюs. He was born and lived in Old Town. He's an artist, and he knew all of the most beautiful variations that were possible. And he'd say to me, Romuk, let's climb up to this or that place. And we'd climb. And there's Sutkus, who also climbed with us. I was just a young guy from Vильnюs. I would climb up all sorts of chimneys and roofs everywhere. You see, I wanted to shoot Vильnюs in the most interesting way possible. It was, quite simply, the normal desire of a young man to do things differently than they had been done until then. And now that we're on that topic, I'm reminded of that St. John's Tower, that stately St. John's Tower. Imagine all those people applying that plaster. Lord knows how many architects worked on it back then. And I thought, why bother? Everything was beautiful, ideal, and pleasant just as it was. I don't think that they had completed some sort of formidable studies. They were able to feel its warmth. They knew how it should look, and they had this goal in mind to make it fit comfortably into its surroundings, so people could feel good about the place. You see the way that space looked back then? I have a few photos of St. John's Church from that angle. The entire city is revealed. This was shot from John's stairwell in the tower. Well, one should rather say St. John's. And I want to show you. This was taken with a zoom. See that bright zone near the art museum? Today that's Town Hall. Such a vibrant and impressionist midday sun. I wanted better optics badly, but they weren't available. This one is almost contemporary. It's on silver bromide paper, which is now rare and extremely expensive. That was my approach, playing with form. You see these columns and the three people? This used up almost an entire roll of film. Those people were walking by, and I wanted to capture them in all of these spots. It would have been nice if there were a person here too, but it was impossible. It was a sort of musical game with form. You see here from, let me look, Dzerzhinska Street, which is now Kalvarijų Street. The technology was poor and I was young. God forbid, I don't want to boast. But how I tried to fill the frame. Look, and with children everywhere. I find the effects of shadows very beautiful. It imparts some sort of mystery for me. I don't know if this is a poetic metaphor or not, but if one wanted to illustrate the historical value of that building, it shouldn't have been photographed this way.
Vertingą pastatą šitaip nereikėjo fotografuoti, reikėjo kažkaip kitaip.
Here. This I find quite beautiful. The effect. The tangle of branches in that one little tower. What makes it so? I don't know. Does the architecture blend with nature, or does the image just happen? And another one, you see? It's a sheer musical game. When I printed this one recently, I also thought, it's really barren. Wouldn't you say? How does one explain this? Some sort of chimney? But it has something to it. And look here, this is a throwaway frame, don't you think? Because you could show that tower differently. Why I needed that shot, what do I know? You'd have to ask a musician. And here's a shrunken view of Old Town. You'd never see an image like that with the naked eye, even if you climbed onto that roof. Here's my university chum, Justas Paleckas. He's also from Vильnюs, born and bred here. And he says about this photo, Romas, I never thought that there could be such an image in Vильnюs. He walked a lot. He was very fond of ambling through the streets. And he said he could never experience such a view, because the effect was captured using a telephoto lens. Do you think it works? You just take some shots, fragments of stairwells, wooden handrails. I have so many photos of details like this one that I don't know what else to show you. This was in the courtyard at the Gibavichus' apartment. Some sort of cubism just appeared out of nowhere. It's a form of play. You don't consciously say that you are creating art, or doing photography, or trying to discover something. For me, it's never like that. I know what it is that I want. I take what I need and I make it my own. It's what you have available to you, and you just go out and do it. It's a magnificent thing. By the way, about the country inside the city, sorry, but I'm rambling. You see the kind of thing that one can find. This was retouched recently. It was from a badly scratched negative. When I discover something like that, it seems to make me a happy person. All those different textures, all of those things and their reflections. The lace curtains, those dried flowers on the sill in a window that's been sealed for winter, along with all of those crumbled things. Then you have a fence like this one. By the way, I could put together a separate album about fences. There's much material on windows and fences, but that's for another conversation. What's very interesting is what's amid all of those brick buildings, that space hemmed in by construction. Those architectural details gave rise to such joy. And to find a fence and what's beyond the fence, well, that's open to discovery. I'm always interested in discovering the countryside that's inside the city, in small details. A variety of people live here who have found their way to Vilnius in various ways. Then there was that change in the city when intellectuals swamped the place. There were so many people of Polish and Jewish ethnicity who disappeared afterward. I taught the children of 3 Jewish families. They lived on the corner of Stikliu and Antokolske streets. Can you imagine that they survived? They were master metalworkers. One was a plumber. I taught them how to play the accordion so I could earn some extra income. And I whisked about like that in Vilnius. See all of these people? I didn't show them in my album. It was youthful exuberance, to take ownership of Vilnius, to privatize it. And so I privatized it. What I like most are those little houses. They're like our pensioners today with their small pensions. Everything is derelict, and they're so weary. I hear there are attempts now to restore the odd one. Maybe the municipality has finally understood that that needs to be undertaken, because those little old houses are also architectural monuments in Vilnius. It's not just the churches. As a child, I grew up in an even poorer house. It was in a laborer's neighborhood. We lived in a veritable shack. We had a kitchen at one end and 2 goats at the other. I needed their milk because I suffered from tuberculosis. And it was only afterward that we outfitted that little house properly, and we were able to keep the goats in a separate place. That was intimacy. Perhaps I had an intuitive and visual grasp of the fact that I needed to preserve this value for posterity. Existence. This is an existential photograph, not a narrative one. There's nothing. Well, there's a yard, it's somber, it's basic everyday life. A person has come to draw water. The Great Flood of the Neris River, 1931. This is the eternally flooded Radvila family mansion. By the way, this section is even more dilapidated today. There are even trees growing in this part over here. Our people don't destroy trees. They care for the things of nature. While the tree's roots continue growing into the basement and wrecking its foundations. I'm not being critical, I'm just stating a fact. There had been shrubs there, but now they're trees. Maybe they'll cut them down. That reflection allowed me to play on that theme of eternal inundation. But something real managed to find its way into the frame. There is no clear light. Everything is seen through a haze. This may be because Vilnius is located in a geographic depression, because there are a lot of exhaust fumes, because everything is so concentrated with so many cars passing through. You have to understand that civilization has spoiled the light. That light was different. It was clear somehow. Now, light has become a problem. There's much more of what the Russians call dimka and what Lithuanians refer to as dumelis, or haze. The light of 1961. Beer and water. I like elevated vantage points like this one. To shoot this frame, one needed to climb onto the roof of the Literatų Svetainė restaurant. One time I almost twisted my neck doing that. I arrived in Vilnius in 1959. What we know today as Vokiečių or German Street was still Museum Street. Back then, I think it was just beginning to be built up. What was left of the old ghetto had been demolished. And you know, I was a farm boy, so I didn't grasp why all of that was being done. And I thought it was such a pity. Why did they demolish it? You need to imagine that there were so many buildings that could have been rebuilt. Those arches, those courtyards, that coziness. Can you imagine? There are a terrific number of arches. Look at that courtyard. There's one arch and another arch, and then a narrow street. It's amazing. Now that I look at that trolleybus, Lord, what kind of trolleybuses they were. I remember them with their little windows. And there were Russian-made victory cars everywhere. Back in those days, football was the #1 sport.
Futbolas buvo numeris pirmas sportas. Ir tarp kitko,
By the way,
Žalgiris, žinokit,
the Vilnius
žaidė
Žalgiris
gerai,
team
jisai
played very well
Tarybų
back
Sąjungoje
then.
yra
It
bronzos
even won
medalius
bronze medals in
laimėjo.
the Soviet Union.
Viskas.
And I was a big
Aš irgi
fan,
buvau,
and I
reiškia,
played
didžiulis
football.
sirgalius. Aš pats
I understand
irgi
that
esu
sport.
žaidęs futbolą, aš tą išmanau žaidimą. Tai
So
žinokit,
masses of
jo
people went to
būdavo į
watch the
futbolo
matches, and the
rungtynes,
street traffic was
masės žmonių
terrible.
eina. Ir ten, žodžiu, judėjimas būdavo kaip reikia.
Lietuvių yra dar
Lithuanians have a certain trait.
lietuviai talentingi.
Lithuanians are most talented when someone is on their back,
Jiems kažkas ant
when they need to
sprando
fight
užlipęs,
and to prove something.
kai jiem reikia kovoti ir įrodinėti.
Why did the Lithuanian photography of the 1960s gain the world's attention? Because we had to prove that Lithuania existed, that we were Lithuanians, that we were different from the rest of the Soviet Union, and so on. It's like our community screw principle. Added pressure means more comes out. But now that we have freedom, there's no pressure from anyone. Nothing needs to be proved, so most people do nothing. We complemented each other very well. Antanas went in for that social and human depth, and he examined it with all of its problems, while my work was more poetic.
Pas mane buvo poetizmas.
They were true photo men, or photo people, like athletes. Especially Antanas Sutkus. I don't know if there were any others. He would arrive running, out of breath, trailing a beat-up Zenit camera behind him. And it was as if he were a dog. He'd say, "Do you have time? Walk me." I don't want to invent things that I truly don't remember. Yes, there were many discussions about the creation of Lithuania's Photographers Union, mostly about organizational questions. Those talks were with artists, writers, with everyone. We had such broad support from Lithuania's cultural community back then. Today, we could never get something like that off the ground. I remember one interesting detail. I met this Communist Party mover and shaker who was important to our cause, who said, "Antanas, I've had it. I see on television and read in all of the newspapers and magazines that we need to create that union of yours." He said, "Yesterday, I went to the Vilius restaurant, and you know, we had all been drinking. And the doorman hands me my coat and asks me when we'll be getting this union of photographers off the ground. Can you imagine?" And he drew a line across his neck with his finger and he said, "If even the doorman is asking me, then we have to form this union already." This photograph is dear to me. That's from Užupis. You know, it seems that photo would be of no value if it didn't draw attention to the child sticking out its head. I exhibited that photo some time ago, and there was a review that said I was a pessimist. You see, a child portrayed thinking deeply is bad. He should be smiling. Well, for me, it's warm. Every child needs something weaker, to have some domestic animal to look after as he's growing up. Here are some shoes. You see, a person has bought 7 pairs of shoes. What year? 1984. May. Rain. That was in the Gudaitis' apartment on Kaštono Street. My leg, good lord. I didn't want to fall out, only to get the widest possible field of view. This balcony is unrivaled, of course. Hitler used to give speeches from balconies like this one, but don't worry, I won't be. It's truly a part of Old Town. All you need to do is go and walk around and look at the people strolling by, walking their dogs. You notice the old women, the tramps. The tramps know me. I always gave them money during the holidays. Some I even knew by name. Despite the noise, it's good to have a balcony overlooking this spot. Somehow there are fewer tramps here now. I don't know where they've disappeared. I guess some of them have died. It used to be that I'd go out and they would shout, "Antanas!" That was how it was. And I would always give them money. I would joke that one needed to pay the hat tax. If you wear a hat, then you have to give the tramps on your street 3 or 5 litas each, and 10 litas during the holidays. One needs to share with other people, with the have-nots. It doesn't matter if they then buy food or beer, that's their concern. It's charity. Everyone wants to give to charity, but on their own terms. It doesn't work like that. If you give it, you don't meddle in how they use it. The hungry plate in the Gudaitis' apartment. Antanas Gudaitis would crumble bread into that plate and carry it out to the pigeons. First he would tap the plate loudly, and that was a signal the pigeons knew, and they would flock to it. The pigeons would feed from that plate. He would place it here. Then he would place the dog's food between the windows for it to cool off. It could make you think that we lived hard lives with nothing to eat. I approached this thing as though it were part of a stage, in the wings, or as if behind the curtain. Do you see my silhouette and the reflection of St. Raphael's Church in that covering? It's another form of play, but for me it also has a sculptural interest. That's St. John's with its smashed windows. That was in 1966. And here's more play. You see clearly that he's an intellectual, and a Lithuanian. And that woman, it seems to me, is also a humanities scholar. And then a silhouette passes by. That sort of about-face is the way I play. I imbue it with meaning. People may or may not see it, but for me it's very important. That crossing of paths, the silhouette of one, the figure of the other. It was fun not because you had set yourself a task, but because you were sketching those things.
Prie univermago buvo ten uždanga ir tas aš kartais gretinu. Ot kažkas už kažko ir tas.
Do you see that texture and that little cat's gaze?
Tas visas ta faktūra.
I used to stay in Viliunus when the Soviet military police would come looking for us. That was a problem for my generation. Some of us faced political issues. We didn't have the freedom to think and build something constructive. That was reflected everywhere, in life, in organizations. Now things are changing. A new level of experience is coming into play. It was always unsafe. Someone was watching, someone was looking, someone was following. I would go into the street and see 4 or 5 military greatcoats, and I knew that the military police were looking for me twice a year. All the men had to hide from them. There was a good reason for men to nail their military service cards to the wall of the re-established Lithuanian parliament. They pounded in those nails as if they had just torn them from their hearts. Here's that textile shop. There's St. John's Church, and there's Pilies Street. That Christmas tree was put up just before Christmas. Today we celebrate Christmas, while back then it was forbidden to sell them at certain times. Only before the New Year, or Novy God as it was known in Russian, could you buy a tree. And that Christmas tree caused everyone to be dumbstruck. You see how they're all staring at it, children and adults alike? And here, Arūnas Tarabilda, God rest his soul. He came by and knocked at the window, and he said, "Hello." And here, do you have any idea who that is? It seems like a garden variety photograph, but who is that person? That is Kazimieras Valaitis. Do you know him? He's not with us any longer. If you only knew him and his work, I had great respect for him as a person. Valaitis was a sort of symbol of the Vильнюс of our youth. He was a symbol of the powerful and free person. He walked like a powerful and well-built man. And that type of powerful man, you could count them on the fingers of one hand. I can include Stasys Krasauskas in that list. Those men were like towers. Here, my aim was not to work. It was about an automatic desire to impart warmth, to impart a warmth to each and every situation. And here, a character study. A pipe, a hat, and a mustache. This is a quintessential study of character. I'm left thinking, if only I had followed him and shot the entire film, then I would have been able to capture him properly. But I just snapped once, and that was it. Here's a series that appeared in the press, The Pipe Puffer. The old chap was smoking, a handsome old gent pulling on his pipe, and a boy walked by carrying a nibbled loaf in his mesh net bag, and grew curious. I was observing this from the other side of the street. See those people crossing paths? That was my modus operandi. People arrived and passed by, and you would get an image out of that. That's a classic. His duds, the homemade hat, that fur-lined coat of his. There were lots of good ones like that.
Daug tokių buvo dalykų. Ir tos moterys eina iš bažnyčios.
Those women, old Polish women, were leaving the church. We chatted and I photographed them. Clearly, there isn't one who's still with us today. A photographer needs one quality that I don't have. I am, you may not believe this, not very brave. I even have my complexes. In certain tricky situations, it's very difficult for me to pull out my camera. I shouldn't be like that. One should be, as we might say in Lithuanian, an akiplėša, an impudent fellow. It was a great way to make contact with your environment. You didn't need to ask permission, nothing of the sort. You looked someone in the eye and smiled. And they would smile back and you snapped a shot. And you didn't need to explain anything. If you felt like it, you introduced yourself. If not, then you just kept snapping. Try to go out and take photographs in the street today. You'll be cross-examined instantly. And when you start explaining yourself, you lose the desire to shoot. If you go to the market, people threaten to smash your cameras. This wrecks your mood and leaves you with no desire to shoot for several days, and you escape to somewhere else. These are very interesting people, from hereabouts, as we say. Those children and their parents' coats are interesting, and here you see those authentic palm fronds and festive biscuits. Look at this image and those faces. These are things I'm showing for the very first time. You just go somewhere and you see an elderly woman sitting in užupis. Have a look. She's been sitting there for some time. The spring sun is shining, and here you have either an exit point or an entry point. Photographers make use of such things. This is near the church in Jerusalem. An asthmatic has just made his way out, wearing his scarves. He's an elderly intellectual priest, and, evidently, he's been taking his time descending those steps. This was a moment when the sun shined forth from those books, as we might say, and when light emanated from those books. This is a portrait which is old-fashioned, perhaps even classical, but I'm faithful to that style. Photography is a miracle of lambency, when the light itself sketches. Just like a butterfly, after winter all of the plants have been carried out to be under the sun. This water well was in Old Town. All sorts of rags, furs, the father's legs, and a cigarette. I have a wealth of photographs involving some sort of narrative. And now that I look at my negatives, I see everywhere that I've written, a boy, photonovella. This one too, a painter is at work. Something happened to that boy's head. Perhaps he fell down or was involved in a collision. It was something dramatic. And the whole thing is teeming with life. I like things that involve a narrative. This is my dear little prince. Today this is on Latako Street, near the left-right gallery. It's the candy factory, which is still there, I believe. And in summer, when the windows were open, the kids buzzed about like insects. And they would hang there and inhale the sweet scented steam coming from the vent. Look at his little shoes, his little sandals, his little feet, his little head. What a fragile little creature. And here I am describing him as if I'd made him myself. That hardness, those grates, the moon, the sun, the world. You play by looking for symbols that help you find associative links. That decade in Vilnius was a veritable feast that no one can ever take from me. It requires an intense observation, where, as you observe, you pull many strands together, and then you can't budge them. I remember discussing this with artists such as Rimtautas Gibavičius and with Švažas and Gudaitis. They asked me, how are you able to do this? It almost seems staged. And I answered, I move and everything changes. You know this, and for us it's also very important. A photographer has to be like a very clean mirror. If you aren't a clean mirror, you won't be able to get that person to open up to you. You have to be able to get a person to open up to you spiritually.